shot a 16-year-old boy too and clubbed him so hard.
Hollywood has been rewriting the American West for over a century, but some of the most compelling westerns weren't invented in studio boardrooms. These films pulled their stories from actual events, real outlaws, genuine tragedies, and documented violence that shaped the frontier. The truth behind these movies is often stranger and darker than any screenwriter could imagine. Number 15. The Revenant, 2015. Alejandro Gonzalez, Iñárritu's survival epic, is loosely based on Hugh Glass's incredible 1823 journey through the Dakota wilderness after being mauled by a grizzly bear. Leonardo DiCaprio plays Glass, a fur trapper who crawls 200 miles to civilization, seeking revenge on the men who abandoned him. The bear attack happened. Glass was scouting ahead of his hunting party when a grizzly protecting cubs attacked him, inflicting wounds so severe his companions assumed he'd die within hours. Two men, John Fitzgerald and Jim Bridger, volunteered to stay with Glass until he died, then give him a proper burial. But when hostile Arikara warriors approached, Fitzgerald convinced young Bridger to abandon Glass, taking his rifle and supplies. What happened next is documented in letters and testimony. Glass regained consciousness, found himself alone and weaponless, and began crawling toward Fort Kiowa. He survived by eating berries, roots, and raw meat scavenged from wolf kills. He set his own broken leg. He let maggots clean his infected wounds. The journey took 6 weeks, covering over 200 miles of wilderness while severely injured. Here's where the film deviates. Glass didn't have a son who was murdered. That's an invention for dramatic stakes. The revenge plot is simplified. In reality, Glass tracked down Fitzgerald months later at Fort Atkinson, but didn't kill him because Fitzgerald had joined the army, and murdering a soldier would mean execution. Glass settled for retrieving his rifle and publicly shaming Fitzgerald. The film's ending, where DiCaprio kills Tom Hardy's Fitzgerald, provides catharsis that history didn't offer. Iñárritu shot the film in chronological order, using only natural light in remote Canadian and Argentinian locations, subjecting his cast and crew to brutal conditions that approximated Glass's suffering. The production became notorious for extreme difficulty, with crew members quitting and the budget ballooning to $135 million. DiCaprio's method performance, including eating raw bison liver and sleeping in animal carcasses, finally earned him his first Academy Award. Number 14. Butch Cassidy and The Sundance Kid, 1969.
Bet on Logan.
I would, but who'd bet on you?
Sundance?
George Roy Hill's Buddy, Western became a phenomenon while taking massive liberties with actual history. Paul Newman and Robert Redford play the famous outlaws during their final years, robbing trains and fleeing to Bolivia. The broad strokes are accurate. Robert Leroy Parker, who became Butch Cassidy, and Harry Longabaugh, the Sundance Kid, led the Wild Bunch gang robbing Union Pacific trains in Wyoming during the 1890s. They did flee to South America in 1901 with Sundance's girlfriend, Etta Place, played by Catherine Ross. But here's where it gets interesting. Nobody knows exactly how they died. The film shows them going out in a blaze of glory, surrounded by Bolivian soldiers. That's one theory based on reports from San Vicente, Bolivia, in 1908. But Cassidy's sister claimed he visited her in Utah in 1925 under an assumed name. Other reports placed both men in various locations throughout the 19-teens and 20s. William Goldman's screenplay chose the dramatic Bolivian shootout, ending the film on a freeze frame before we see them die, acknowledging the uncertainty while providing emotional closure. The famous bicycle scene never happened. The "raindrops keep falling on my head" sequence is a pure Hollywood invention. Etta Place didn't return to America before the shootout. She stayed in Bolivia with them, though the film sent her home earlier. The super posse that hunts them relentlessly represents the Pinkerton Detective Agency's actual pursuit, though compressed for narrative purposes. The real pursuit lasted years and covered thousands of miles. 20th Century Fox executives hated Goldman's script, finding it too jokey and unconventional. They tried to force rewrites, but Hill and the actors defended it. The film became a massive hit, earning over $100 million and winning 4 Academy Awards. Its success proved audiences would accept westerns that questioned genre conventions and treated outlaws as complicated humans rather than pure heroes or villains. Number 13. Tombstone, 1993.
Bird at the farrow table.
You son of a bitch, I'll blow you right up that Wildcat's ass. Do you hear me?
George Cosmatos directed this account of the Earp brothers and the gunfight at the OK Corral, with surprising historical fidelity despite its theatrical style. Kurt Russell plays Wyatt Earp, Val Kilmer is Doc Holliday, and the film chronicles the events leading to the famous 30-second shootout on October 26, 1881. The basics are accurate. The Earps did clash with the Cowboys, a loosely organized group of rustlers and outlaws. The gunfight did happen near the OK Corral in Tombstone, Arizona. Virgil and Morgan Earp were wounded in subsequent attacks. With Morgan cold in March 1882, Wyatt did lead a vendetta ride, hunting down the men he believed responsible. But here's what the film gets right that most versions don't. The gunfight wasn't a fair duel between honorable men. It was a messy street brawl where terrified men shot at each other from close range, many bullets missing despite the proximity. The Cowboys weren't professional gunfighters. They were cattle thieves and thugs. The Earps weren't lawmen defending justice. They were former criminals themselves with badges, motivated by financial interests and personal grudges as much as law enforcement. Doc Holliday's relationship with Wyatt, portrayed as genuine friendship built on mutual respect, matches historical accounts from people who knew both men. Kilmer's performance captures Holliday's contradictions, an educated dentist dying of tuberculosis who found purpose in violence. His famous line, "I'm your huckleberry," is debated by historians, though contemporary accounts suggest he did use unusual phrases that confused his enemies. The film's depiction of the vendetta ride, where Wyatt's posse murdered cowboys in extrajudicial callings, acknowledges the moral ambiguity most Westerns avoid. Hollywood Pictures released the film expecting modest returns, but it became a surprise hit, earning over $70 million. The script, credited to Kevin Jarrah but heavily rewritten during production, drew from multiple historical sources, including Wyatt's own dubious autobiography and more reliable third-party accounts. Number 12. The Assassination of Jesse James, by the coward Robert Ford, 2007. Andrew Dominik's meditation on fame and betrayal chronicles the final months of America's most famous outlaw with brutal historical accuracy. Brad Pitt plays Jesse James during his paranoid decline, while Casey Affleck portrays Robert Ford, the gang member who murdered him for reward money and glory. But here's the kicker. The film draws extensively from Ron Hansen's novel, which itself was meticulously researched using contemporary newspaper accounts, letters, and court documents from 1882. The actual assassination happened almost exactly as depicted. Ford shot James in the back while he was adjusting a picture frame in his home in St. Joseph, Missouri on April 3, 1882. James had removed his gun belt, a rare moment of vulnerability that Ford exploited. The film's portrayal of Ford's subsequent life as a despised celebrity touring in stage shows, reenacting the murder, is entirely accurate. Ford performed The Outlaws of Missouri hundreds of times, playing himself, caling James nightly while audiences jeered and called him a coward. He died in 1892, shot in a barroom in Creede, Colorado by Edward O'Kelly, who became briefly famous for calling the man who killed Jesse James. Dominik spent years researching James's psychology, consulting with historians who'd studied his letters and the testimony of people who knew him. The film's depiction of James as charismatic, violent, and increasingly unstable matches historical accounts from former gang members who survived him. Warner Brothers had no idea how to market a 2-hour, 40-minute meditation on celebrity and murder, so they barely released it. The film played in limited theaters, earned strong reviews, and vanished within weeks. Roger Deakins' cinematography, which makes Missouri look like a series of fading photographs, earned an Academy Award nomination. The narration, adapted directly from Hansen's literary prose, provides historical context that most Westerners ignore, explaining how railroads and banks exploited farmers, making James a Robin Hood figure to those who never met him. Number 11. Dances with Wolves, 1990. Kevin Costner's directorial debut tells a fictionalized version of stories documented throughout frontier history, where white men lived among native tribes and adopted their culture. Costner plays Lieutenant John Dunbar, a Union officer who requests a posting to the frontier, befriends a Lakota Sioux tribe, and eventually joins them. While Dunbar himself is invented, his journey mirrors documented cases of cultural adoption. The most famous parallel is Cynthia Ann Parker, captured by Comanches as a child in 1836. She lived with the tribe for 24 years, married a chief, and had 3 children, including Quanah Parker, who became the last Comanche war chief. When Texas Rangers recaptured her in 1860, she was fully Comanche in language and identity, never readjusting to white society. She died in 1870 trying to return to her adopted people. The film's depiction of Lakota culture was informed by extensive consultation with tribal historians and elders. Doris Leader Charge taught the cast the Lakota language, and the film presents lengthy scenes entirely in Lakota with subtitles, unprecedented for a Central Hollywood Western. The buffalo hunt sequence used actual buffalo from a private ranch, with Lakota stunt performers riding alongside them using historically accurate techniques. The film's politics, showing white expansion as genocide and Lakota society as sophisticated and worth preserving, reversed traditional Western narratives that portrayed Native peoples as savage obstacles to civilization. Orion Pictures bet heavily on the film, giving Costner final cut and a substantial budget despite his inexperience. The gamble paid off spectacularly. The film earned $424 million worldwide and won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. The 3-hour running time, Lakota dialogue, and revisionist politics should have doomed it commercially, but audiences responded to its sincerity and scope. The film's success opened doors for more nuanced portrayals of Native experiences, though Hollywood still struggles with authentic representation. Number 10. Open Range, 2003. Kevin Costner directed this account of the Johnson County War, an actual 1892 conflict between cattle barons and small ranchers in Wyoming. Robert Duvall and Costner play free grazers who get caught in a range war when a corrupt marshal and his hired guns try to drive them off the open grassland. The film compresses and fictionalizes specific events, but captures the Johnson County War's essential dynamics. Wealthy cattlemen, belonging to the Wyoming Stock Growers Association, did hire gunmen to eliminate small ranchers and homesteaders they accused of rustling. The hired guns received a list of 70 men to Akiao. In April 1892, this private army invaded Johnson County, besieged several ranches, and murdered at least 2 men before the United States cavalry intervened. The invaders faced no serious legal consequences, protected by their wealth and political connections. The film's climactic shootout, in which the heroes face off against the corrupt marshal and his men in a brutal street battle, represents the violence that erupted throughout the conflict. The actual fighting was messier and lasted months, but the film captures how economic power used violence to eliminate competition while hiding behind legal authority. Duvall's character, Boss Spearman, embodies the older generation of cattlemen who believed in open range and fair competition. Costner's Charlie Waite represents former violent men seeking redemption through honest work. Both types existed throughout the frontier, and their alliance against corrupt power reflects documented resistance to the cattle barons' land grab. The film's treatment of violence, influenced by Unforgiven, shows gunfights as horrific rather than heroic. When Costner's character Kales men, he's traumatized despite having kaled before. The final battle leaves him shaking and sick, his hands barely functional from adrenaline crash. This psychological realism contrasts with traditional westerns, in which heroes gun down enemies without emotional consequence. Touchstone Pictures released the film with minimal marketing, and it underperformed despite strong reviews. The slow pacing and emphasis on character over action made it unmarketable to audiences expecting modern western excitement. Number 9. The Wild Bunch, 1969. Sam Peckinpah's bloody masterpiece isn't based on one true story, but synthesizes multiple historical elements from the Mexican Revolution and the dying days of the Old West. The film follows an aging outlaw gang attempting one final robbery in 1913 Texas before fleeing to Mexico. While the specific characters are fictional, their situation reflects historical reality. By 1913, the Old West was dead. Automobiles, telegraphs, and modern law enforcement made traditional outlawry impossible. many aging outlaws did flee to Mexico during the Revolution, some fighting as mercenaries for various factions. The film's depiction of Mapache, a brutal Mexican general, is based on multiple revolutionary commanders who controlled regions through terror and negotiated with American gunrunners for weapons. The Thornton Posse, hunting the Wild Bunch, represents the railroad company's private detectives and bounty hunters who relentlessly tracked outlaws. The Final Massacre, where the bunch choose suicide by taking on Mapache's entire army, is pure fiction but reflects the fatalism of men who knew their time had passed. Peckinpah researched extensively, interviewing elderly Texans who remembered the transition period and consulting historians of the Mexican Revolution. The film's visual style, particularly the slow-motion violence, was revolutionary, but served a historical purpose. Peckinpah wanted audiences to confront the cost of violence rather than consume it as entertainment. The 4-minute finale required 3 months to edit, using multiple camera speeds and angles to create balletic carnage that's simultaneously beautiful and horrifying. Warner Bros. Nearly shelved the film after seeing Peckinpah's cut, horrified by the violence. They demanded extensive cuts, but Peckinpah fought them, arguing the film's anti-violence message required showing violence truthfully. The studio relented partially, releasing a compromised version that still shocked audiences and critics. The movie bombed initially, but found audiences through word of mouth, eventually becoming recognized as one of cinema's greatest westerns. Number 8, Geronimo, An American Legend, 1993. Walter Hill directed this account of the Apache Wars, focusing on Geronimo's final years of resistance and eventual surrender. Wes Studi plays Geronimo, while Gene Hackman portrays General George Crook. The film follows actual historical events from 1885 to 1886, when Geronimo and a small band of Chiricahua Apaches evaded thousands of American and Mexican soldiers across brutal desert terrain. The basic facts are accurate. Geronimo did surrender to Crook in March 1886 at Cañón de los Embudos, then escaped again days later when he learned he'd be transported to Florida as a prisoner. He surrendered to General Nelson Miles in September 1886, ending the Apache Wars. The film shows Geronimo's band numbered fewer than 40 people, including women and children, hunted by 5,000 American soldiers and 3,000 Mexican troops. That's a documented fact. The campaign cost millions of dollars and lasted over a year to capture a small group of starving refugees. Here's where the film deviates. The character of Lieutenant Charles Gatewood, played by Jason Patric, is real, but his role is romanticized. Gatewood did negotiate Geronimo's final surrender, but the film makes him more sympathetic to Apache culture than historical record support. The relationship between Geronimo and Al Sieber, the chief scout played by Robert Duvall, is partially invented, though both men existed and likely interacted. The film's depiction of Geronimo as a spiritual leader and tactical genius aligns with Apache oral histories and army reports detailing his ability to evade pursuit. The final betrayal, where the government imprisoned all Chiricahua Apaches, including those who'd served as army scouts, is absolutely accurate. Geronimo spent his final 23 years as a prisoner of war, touring with Wild West shows, and dying in 1909 at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Columbia Pictures barely promoted the film, releasing it in December 1993, where it got buried by holiday competition and earned weak box office despite critical praise. Number 7, Wyatt Earp, 1994.
I told your brothers when I went off to fight, and I suppose the time's come for you. You know, I'm a man that believes in the law.
Lawrence Kasdan's 3-hour biography of Wyatt Earp attempted comprehensive historical accuracy, but suffered from competing with Tombstone, which was released 6 months earlier. Kevin Costner plays Earp from childhood through his final years, covering his time as a buffalo hunter, lawman, gambler, and celebrity. The film draws extensively from multiple sources, including Earp's dictated memoirs to Stuart Lake, though those memoirs are notoriously self-serving. The childhood sequence featuring Wyatt's father, Nicholas, a stern moralist who instilled rigid principles in his sons, aligns with historical accounts. The Earp family did move constantly, Nicholas searching for opportunities while preaching adherence to law and family loyalty. Wyatt's first wife, Yorilla Sutherland, did die, possibly from typhoid, shortly after their marriage in 1870, devastating him and contributing to his later emotional coldness. His subsequent relationship with Mattie Blaylock, portrayed as troubled and ending badly, is documented, though uncomfortable. Mattie was likely addicted to laudanum, and Wyatt abandoned her for Josephine Marcus, played by Joanna Going. Mattie committed suicide in 1888. The film doesn't shy from Earp's moral ambiguities. It shows him working as an enforcer for prostitution and gambling operations in Wichita and Dodge City, using violence to maintain order while profiting from vice. His friendship with Doc Holliday developed as depicted, based on mutual respect between damaged men who understood each other's codes. The Tombstone sequence and subsequent vendetta ride follow the historical record closely, acknowledging that Wyatt murdered men in extrajudicial coolings while pursuing what he considered justice. The film's final act, covering Earp's decades after Tombstone as a wanderer and opportunist, is rarely depicted in westerns. He lived until 1929, dying in Los Angeles at age 80, consulting on early Western films and trying to control his own legend. Warner Brothers invested heavily, but the film's length and dark tone hurt its commercial prospects. It earned only $56 million against a $63 million budget, considered a disappointment. Number 6. Hostiles, 2017.
Chief Yellow Hawk. The Army wants to be certain that the Chief gets home to Montana safely without incident.
Scott Cooper's brutal Western is fictional, but based on documented practices of forcibly relocating Native peoples in the late 19th century. Christian Bale plays Captain Joseph Blocker, a cavalry officer ordered to escort a dying Cheyenne chief from New Mexico to Montana in 1892. While the specific characters are invented, the scenario reflects actual forced relocations and the violence they provoked. The film's opening massacre, where Comanches murder a frontier family, is based on documented attacks throughout the 1860s through 80s as displaced tribes fought back against encroachment. The savagery depicted isn't gratuitous. Settlers did suffer horrific violence, and the film refuses to sanitize it. Rosamund Pike plays the sole survivor, traumatized into near catatonia, representing thousands of women who experienced similar atrocities. The film's parallel violence, showing white soldiers committing equally brutal acts against Native prisoners, acknowledges that savagery flowed in all directions. Blocker's character, a professional soldier who spent decades calling Apaches and Cheyennes, must confront his own capacity for atrocity while escorting people he's spent his life viewing as subhuman. This journey from dehumanization to recognition of shared humanity happened for some individuals, though systemic racism and violence continued. The film consulted extensively with historians and tribal advisors to ensure an accurate portrayal of Cheyenne culture and the Army's treatment of Native prisoners. The practice of transporting elderly or dying chiefs back to ancestral lands did occur, usually as propaganda to demonstrate government mercy while continuing policies of cultural genocide. Cooper shot on location in harsh conditions, using natural light and period-appropriate costumes and equipment to create documentary realism. The violence, when it erupts, is sudden and horrifying rather than choreographed. Men die confused and afraid, not heroically. Entertainment Studios distributed the film in a limited release, where it earned strong reviews but performed poorly at the box office. The uncompromising bleakness and 3 acts of graphic violence made it unmarketable to mainstream audiences expecting traditional Western heroics or apparent moral certainties. Number 5. The Outlaw, Josey Wales, 1976. Clint Eastwood directed this revenge western, loosely based on Missouri bushwhacker guerrillas during the Civil War. Eastwood plays Josey Wales, a farmer whose family gets murdered by Union soldiers, driving him to join Bloody Bill Anderson's Confederate guerrillas. The character is fiction, but the historical context is meticulously accurate. Missouri's Civil War was uniquely brutal. The state was split between Union and Confederate sympathies, and irregular warfare consumed the region. Bloody Bill Anderson, portrayed briefly in the film, was an honest, psychotic killer who scalped Union soldiers and wore their scalps on his saddle. His guerrillas included the younger Jesse James, creating a direct link between Civil War violence and post-war outlawry. The film shows Anderson's men refusing to surrender after Appomattox, attacked under a false flag of truce. This depicts an actual event. On September 27th, 1865, Union forces at Centralia, Missouri, promised amnesty to surrendering guerrillas, then massacred them when they disarmed. Survivors like Josey Wales in the film became outlaws because they couldn't trust official pardons after that betrayal. The film's depiction of Wales fleeing to Indian Territory and forming an unlikely family with displaced Cherokees, Comanches, and outcasts reflects frontier reality. Indian Territory became a refuge for criminals, deserters, and people who couldn't survive in settled society. The communities that formed there were genuinely multicultural and operated outside conventional law. Chief Dan George plays Lone Waddy, an elderly Cherokee who delivers the film's moral philosophy. Survival requires adaptation and forgiveness. George, himself Cherokee, brought authenticity to the role and improvised dialogue incorporating actual tribal wisdom. The film's politics, sympathetic to Confederate guerrillas while also showing their brutality and acknowledging that Civil War violence destroyed everyone it touched, created controversy. Warner Brothers worried the film glorified Confederate terrorism, but Eastwood argued he was showing historical complexity rather than taking sides. The film earned over $31 million and became one of Eastwood's signature roles. Number 4, True Grit, 2010.
She's a 14-year-old, tough, witty girl, and she has this goal, and
The Coen brothers' adaptation of Charles Portis's novel depicts frontier justice in 1878 Arkansas and Indian Territory, with remarkable period accuracy. Jeff Bridges plays Rooster Cogburn, a dissolute U.S. Marshal hired by 14-year-old Maddie Ross to hunt her father's color. While the characters are fictional, the legal and social conditions are meticulously researched. The film's portrayal of Fort Smith, Arkansas, as a violent frontier town where Judge Isaac Parker presided over federal cases from Indian Territory is absolutely accurate. Parker, mentioned in the film, was called the hanging judge because he sentenced 160 people to death during his 21 years on the bench. 79 were actually hanged. The film shows public hangings as community events, which they were. Thousands of people would travel to Fort Smith to watch multiple condemned men hang simultaneously. The practice of United States Marshals operating in Indian Territory with limited oversight is depicted accurately. These marshals had enormous power and often supplemented income through bounties and confiscated property, creating incentives for violence rather than due process. Bridges Cogburn embodies this corruption, a color with a badge who drinks constantly and shoots first rather than attempt arrest. The film's visual style, shot by Roger Deakins in the cold winter light with harsh shadows, captures the brutality of frontier life. No romantic sunsets or beautiful landscapes soften the reality of people living in drafty buildings, eating terrible food, and dying from minor injuries that become infected. The language, drawn directly from Portis's novel, uses period-appropriate formal diction that sounds strange to modern ears, but reflects how educated people actually spoke in the 1870s. Haley Steinfeld's Maddie speaks in precise biblical cadences because a 14-year-old girl from a religious Arkansas family would have been raised on scripture and formal rhetoric. The film's violence, particularly the climactic shootout where Cogburn charges 4 outlaws while holding his horse's reins in his teeth, is based on documented tactics used by frontier gunfighters. Paramount released the film on Christmas Day 2010, and it became a surprise blockbuster, earning over $252 million worldwide. Number 3, The Assassination of Billy the Kid, not yet made using Chisum, 1970.
I see what you mean. Can it ever go away, that smell?
Andrew V. McLaglin's Chisum chronicles the Lincoln County War, one of the bloodiest range wars in the history of the West. John Wayne plays John Chisum, a mighty cattle baron fighting corrupt businessmen for control of the New Mexico Territory in 1878. The historical events depicted are substantially accurate, though condensed. John Chisum was New Mexico's most prominent rancher, controlling an empire of cattle and land. His opponent, Lawrence Murphy, portrayed in the film, owned the only major store in Lincoln County and used monopoly power to enslave smaller ranchers and homesteaders economically through debt. The conflict exploded when Murphy's men murdered rancher John Tunstall, an event shown in the film. Tunstall's death triggered the Lincoln County War, a series of murders and battles that culled dozens and destroyed the local economy. Billy the Kid appears as a supporting character, accurately portrayed as one of Tunstall's ranch hands who became a cooler after his employer's murder. The film shows Billy's transformation from loyal employee to outlaw, though it softens his violence. The real Billy the Kid culled at least 8 men, possibly more, and the romanticized version in Chisum ignores his capacity for cruelty. The climactic battle in Lincoln, where regulators fought Murphy's men in the town's streets, depicts the actual 5-day Battle of Lincoln in July 1878. Both sides barricaded themselves in buildings and exchanged fire while civilians fled. The arrival of the United States cavalry to restore order happened as shown, though the film simplifies the political complexity. Governor Lew Wallace declared martial law and eventually negotiated a ceasefire, though violence continued sporadically for years. Warner Brothers marketed Chisum as a traditional John Wayne Western, downplaying the historical basis and emphasizing action. The film performed well commercially, earning over $12 million, but critics dismissed it as formulaic, despite the screenplay's historical research. Modern historians recognize it as one of the more accurate depictions of the Lincoln County War, despite its conventional Western structure and Wayne's aging star presence somewhat mismatched to playing a 40-year-old historical figure. Number 2. The Homesman, 2014.
Got something to eat. Now y'all be good girls and go to sleep. I'll be back directly.
Tommy Lee Jones directed this adaptation of Glendon Swarthout's novel about the brutal reality of frontier life for women. Jones plays a claim jumper who agrees to help Hilary Swank's character transport 3 insane women from Nebraska to Iowa in the 1850s. While the specific story is fictional, it's based on documented cases of women driven mad by the isolation and hardship of the frontier. Historical records from prairie settlements describe numerous women suffering complete mental breakdowns from loneliness, endless labor, child mortality, and the psychological weight of living in the dugouts miles from other humans. The practice of transporting mentally ill people back to families or institutions in the East happened regularly. Communities couldn't support asylums, so damaged individuals became someone else's problem. The film shows the women's madness resulting from specific tragedies. One lost 3 children to diphtheria in a single week. Another was assaulted. The third endured years of isolation in a sod house with a brutal husband. These scenarios reflect documented experiences that broke frontier women's minds. Swank's Mary B. Cuddy, a capable woman rejected by men because she's too old and too educated, represents thousands of single women who homesteaded alone. The film's depiction of her hanging herself after being used sexually by Jones's character shocked audiences, but reflects the historical reality that independent women faced constant degradation and violence. Jones consulted extensively with historians specializing in women's frontier experiences. The production design shows accurate details of sod houses, the poor nutrition available, and the grinding labor required for daily survival. The film's bleak visual style, shot in harsh prairie light, emphasizes how the landscape itself became an antagonist. Roadside attractions gave the film a limited release, recognizing its uncommercial darkness. It earned only $2 million despite strong reviews. The film's feminism, showing how patriarchy literally drove women insane while society blamed them for weakness, made it too challenging for audiences expecting traditional Western adventure. Jones's performance as a cowardly claim jumper who redeems himself through a single decent act subverted his usual authority figure roles. Number 1. Meek's Cutoff, 2010.
It's a quick one.
He knows where the water is.
I've seen him strip the flesh clean off a man while he's...
Kelly Reichardt's minimalist masterpiece takes the top spot because it depicts the Oregon Trail migration with absolute historical fidelity, while creating unbearable tension from mundane survival challenges. Michelle Williams leads a cast playing settlers following Stephen Meek, a guide who lost them in the Oregon desert in 1845. The film is based on the actual Meek Cutoff disaster. Stephen Meek, a former mountain man, convinced about 1,000 emigrants to follow his shortcut to Oregon's Willamette Valley, claiming it would save weeks. He got them catastrophically lost in the high desert east of the Cascade Mountains. The wagon train wandered for months, running out of water and food, with dozens dying before they found the Deschutes River and salvation. Reichardt's film follows a small group from this larger train, showing in excruciating detail what daily life on the trail actually involved. The walking pace is accurate. Wagons moved at most 2 miles per hour. The water rationing, with each person receiving 1 cup daily, matches historical accounts. The constant anxiety about whether Meek knows where he's going or is leading them to death captures the emigrants' documented desperation. The film includes almost no traditional dialogue. People communicate in fragments while working, too exhausted for conversation. This is reflected in the trail diaries' descriptions of settlers who were too tired and dehydrated to talk. The landscape, shot in the real Oregon high desert where the events occurred, is beautiful and lethal. Reichert uses the Academy ratio, the boxy old film format, to create claustrophobic compositions that trap characters despite vast open spaces. The film's ambiguous ending, in which the group finds water, but we never learn whether they survived the overall journey, acknowledges that many Meek Cutoff emigrants died, and that their stories weren't recorded. Oscilloscope Laboratories released the film in limited art house distribution, where it found small but devoted audiences. The film's radical rejection of Western conventions and Hollywood pacing made it unmarketable to mainstream viewers. But for those willing to engage with it, Meek's Cutoff offers the most accurate portrayal of the hardship of frontier migration ever filmed. The Old West wasn't forged in Hollywood. It was carved from blood, grit, and impossible survival, and these films barely scratch the surface. If you want more hidden truth behind the movies you think you know, stick around. History is wilder than fiction, and we're just getting started.